Throughout our years in the school system, we are required to read many books, some good, some bad. We read The Outsiders back in 7th grade, and I believe it was not hit or miss, but instead a grand spectrum of opinions. A lot of kids became obsessed with it. Some thought it was decent, but not many despised it like other books we read. Generally, after we read books for school, we do not do anything about it. But around the same time every year, new 7th graders start posting about the movie on TikTok. Trust, I fell into that pit in 7th grade. But if that doesn't prove how significant it has been to kids around the world, it is also important to note that the book has sold 15 million copies, and a museum opened completely in its favor, which I was fortunate enough to see over the summer. I believe most, if not all, of the hate the book gets is because the reader does not completely understand the complexity and meaning the book has. That is not to say the meaning is not clear, just that people who have not felt what it is like to constantly carry hate and prejudice from others on their shoulders will not as easily understand what the greasers are going through. Empathy is not always easy. In most cases, books generally intend to have at least one character that you can cling onto because they're relatable, and if there isn't, you're more likely to dislike the book. That's just the way things are. I only wish that those who do not like the book at least understand the important social issues represented for a better understanding of our world. It's an old book, but still beyond relevant. Disclaimer: my discussion flips between parts of the book and the movie, but all of which are still relevant to one another anyhow. The Outsiders portrays many different taboo topics, like classism, hate crimes, suicide, child abuse and neglect, and overall prejudice. The characters themselves are not real people, but greasers and socias were real groups in the 60s. Systemically, greasers were less fortunate financially and dressed more alternative than most and received oppression for it. Those who do not understand how it is like to be resentfully bullied may believe that they deserved it because of how they act, but that is ignorant. The Curtises are orphans. Dallas's father neglects him, and Johnny's parents are physically abusive. How are they to learn to live and communicate with others healthily when they are surrounded by hate and absence from socias in their families? Even with that point out of the way, the socias start the problem. Their reactions come from defense and routine, just like at the park the day Bob died.
They all ran. They all ran off. I stabbed them. They all ran.
Near the beginning of the book, Ponyboy and Johnny go to the park, where the socias proceed to jump the boys and almost kill Pony. In defense for both, Johnny killed Bob and scared the rest of the gang off, sparking the main conflict of the story. Nowadays, the killer would most likely be let off for self-defense, but with the reputations the greaser had, and the period it was, they were almost guaranteed to get some harsh repercussions for killing Bob. This situation is especially ironic, because Ponyboy and Johnny are the least violent of the group. Johnny had even been described as looking like a kicked puppy in the first chapter. Normally, Dallas is the one on the run from the police, his life of crime in New York following him to Tulsa. It is a different perspective for him to be helping others run, let alone those culprits being Ponyboy and Johnny, those who mean the most to him in the world.
I don't guess my folks are worried about me.
Hey man,
or
the boys are worried. Do you know that 2-Bit wanted to go to Texas to hunt for you?
Yeah, I asked if my parents asked about me.
No, they didn't ask about you, so what?
They ground him in a world that tempts him to danger like a dog. His life has been better since he moved to Oklahoma and met the gang, and I believe he connects that new stability to them, especially Johnny. As the book goes on, his attachment to him is bordering unhealthy, but can you blame him? Dallas Winston has always been an erratic character, but after Johnny broke his spine in the church fire, you could see the rapid deterioration in his mental health. Truthfully, he foreshadowed his own death with the way he spoke at the hospital and in the car on the way there.
Gotta get in with those socials. Stupid Johnny. Watch out for yourself. Nothing can touch you.
At the beginning of the scene, he was his usual self. But the moment 2-Bit told him how Johnny was, his whole demeanor shifted, talking about how they needed to beat the socias for Johnny. Normally, the motivations between the rumbles were for pride or fun, but this time was different, at least for him. And considering his past and ending fate, it was not too far off to assume that he did not care whether they lived or died in that rumble. That is not to say he would have killed anyone from his anger. It was a common misconception in my 7th grade class that Dally was angry, which is why he robbed the store and pulled the gun on the cops, but that could not be further from the truth. What Dally did was an act of suicide. There is no doubt about it. Suicide by cop is a real thing that happens, and there are 2 different kinds. The first is when you have already committed a crime and the police are pursuing you. You decide that you would rather die than be arrested, so you behave threateningly to get them to shoot. The other kind, like what Dallas did, is when a person just suddenly commits a crime to attract the attention of cops, with the intention of making them shoot. First of all, the circumstances make it clear what is happening, but even then, all of his mannerisms connect to it. He looks genuinely distraught holding the gun at the store owner's face, and even then, he was stalling getting up there. He did not have any intentions on shooting, and as Ponyboy yells later, the gun was not even loaded. He was a kid who was hurting and on the path to get better. I knew he was dead, because Dally Winston wanted to be dead, and he always got what he wanted. Page 154.
Pony.
In Dally's last words, he said pony, further implying that was who he cared for the most beyond Johnny and the gang. While he trusts Derry the most, Pony is who he has the most hope for, who he wants to protect. Dally is a tragic, but pretty well-written example of dependency in literature.
Come on, Johnny, don't die on me now. Please.
Lastly, I want to touch a bit on the relationship between the Curtis brothers, Ponyboy, Soda Pop, and Daryl. Their relationship is very complex, which is why Derry is mischaracterized as much as Dally, if not more. The main reason the assumption he was abusive came to place was because he shoved Ponyboy onto the ground during an argument, practically causing everything in the book to happen. That, and the two were almost always fighting, but there was a reason for that plain as day. Derry, like the rest of the gang, is just a kid. He's barely even adult at the end of the day, and has legal custody of 2 of his brothers after his parents died 8 months before the story took place at the beginning. He had to quit school to work, day and night, just to barely have enough to support his family. The pressure Derry has on him is astronomical, and although some of his actions are harsh and uncalled for, he is hurting and grieving. He lost every opportunity he had to do what he wanted in his life, and is so harsh on Ponyboy because he wants him to do something good with his life, to get an education and be something more than just a greaser. He sees himself in Pony. It is also important to keep in mind that he's still the brother of Soda and Pony, even if he has custody over them. They have grown up fighting and roughhousing, and the sudden change in dynamics will not change how they act with one another so quickly. Soda Pop is another issue in himself. It is not so commonly known by those who casually read the book, or did not investigate it after reading, but the girlfriend who left him throughout the book was in fact pregnant by another man. Despite knowing this, Soda still wanted to marry her.
So, are you in love with Sandy? What's it like?
This time. It's real nice.
Johnny and Pony may be the least violent, but Soda is the most romantic. He feels the most. He's also clearly a pushover. Throughout almost every scene where Derry and Pony argue, he is always in the middle, and you can tell how much he hates it, yet he never speaks up. Sure, he stands up for Pony a bit, but never to the point where he is angry at Derry or makes any difference whatsoever. It even feels at times that he is only a side character, there to enhance the dynamic between the other 2 brothers, which is clearly intentional but sad nevertheless. After Pony was in the hospital and the brothers finally reunited, things began to get better for the brothers, as Derry was a lot more understanding of the needs of Ponyboy.
I thought we lost you like we did Mom and Dad.
It became a lot more real to him that Pony could have really gotten hurt or killed at any moment, just like their parents. Life was a fickle game that they were all playing, and had to enjoy and embrace the moments they had. In the cut version of the movie, the brothers stay positive, and truthfully, you do not see too many more scenes of one another. However, in the longer version of the movie, there are many scenes that were added, one of which being right before the ending. This scene depicts the brothers at a table, arguing once more. The difference this time is that Soda Pop expresses how tired he is of being the man in the middle of all of their arguments and runs away. When the other boys catch him, Soda talks about how the brothers are tearing each other apart with their words, and truthfully, it was very well written and a healthy scene between the family. Was it negative? Yes. But it shows now that the brothers have the capacity to listen to one another and really understand their feelings, promising to be better. Improvement is not a linear scale. It takes time, and things will happen that makes you lose progress. Just because Derry was hard on Ponyboy again after having a while of being uplifting does not mean he's not trying. That is something that people need to apply in real life as well, especially in terms of relapsing. Since I was introduced to The Outsiders, I can confidently say that it is my favorite book and movie. So with that being said, I rate it 1,000,000 out of 10. Story-wise, all the main characters are interesting and important to the story, giving something to the course of events. Even characters like Randy, Two-Bit, and Steve, which the story could do without, give something to the reader and provide relief from the main story. To me, characters and their dynamics with one another are the most important thing in a story, especially in a book where you have no visuals to drag things along. With unpleasant and boring characters, you are less able to connect with the book. The characters were even more fleshed out in the movie, where the cast was all phenomenal and fit the roles perfectly. All beside Dally, who looks different physically in the movie, but I will admit that did trip me out when I was first watching it. But now I can't imagine Dallas as anyone else besides Matt Dillon, because his performance was out of this world. Besides the characters, the book was also an extremely easy read. It did not choose to dabble on about unnecessary details about the scenery or whatever other books talk about. It was straightforward and not confusing to follow, which I think is important in a book. Critics may believe it is less impressive in a literary standpoint, but when you have kids read a book, you want it to be comprehensible and it makes sense. Unlike some books. I am extremely grateful that the book is in the curriculum for 7th graders, not only because it was a staple in my early teen years, but because it is a very relevant and important book about social issues, even after the 50 years it has been published for. Thank you for listening to my analysis and review of The Outsiders. If you liked it, keep an eye out for more school book reviews, because I have plenty of strong opinions. Most a lot more negative in this one. Oops. Make sure to stay gold haze high.